Hello, this is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today on April 11th of 2022 to speak with you about the Second Amendment, to talk about your freedom and the perception of your freedom, especially when the government is controlled over whether you can exercise your freedom or not. We're going to be speaking about something that I think is very interesting and rarely pointed out to the public because you're not supposed to think about this. But before we get started, we do want to mention to you that if this is the first time you are joining our channel, we appreciate you. We thank you for being part of our audience. In addition, we want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to receive your chats, your tweets, and your phone calls from anywhere in the world to talk to you about the issues that matter, and more importantly, to hear what you have to say. Because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to be able to speak and to tell our elected leaders what is important to you. So we hope that you will join us this Sunday and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So today we want to take a step into the media to see how the media is portraying your rights, your freedoms, and the way that they are subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, changing the way you perceive the world, and that enables certain individuals, a small elite group of elected officials, and the government as a whole to be able to control whether or not you can exercise your rights, your freedoms that you were born with, that our Constitution in America has guaranteed, and yet these are the same rights and freedoms that are being taken away from you day by day. Let's explore what we're talking about. As many of you may be aware, we often take a look at the YouGov polling that takes place on a regular basis. And often this is something that leads to further polls quoted by much of the news media, trying to indicate that the nation feels one way or another about a certain issue. And like many of the polls that are used to emphasize a point of view, it's political and it matters on what is the question that is asked, how it is asked, and the choices that you have in that poll. Because we see many leaders elected at various levels that refer to a poll to justify an action, to justify legislation that takes away the freedoms of American citizens. We are born with all rights given to us by birth. And then we allow government, through the creation of laws, to take away some of those rights to better maintain our government, our society, and our lives. It's an agreement we all make. But the question is, which rights do we give up? How much control do we give over to the government? Many would say that today, the government, even in the United States, the most free nation in the world, where we see the government is seeking to micromanage individuals' lives. You may agree or you may disagree. But it is happening to some extent. The question is, should it? And is it happening honestly, organically? Or is this something that is being engineered to subtly and continuously take away your rights and freedoms until you have none? In this most recent YouGov poll issued on April 11th, gun control and ghost guns. Now that's very important, that you are being manipulated. Whether you agree with gun control or not, whether you believe the government should have a greater role in being able to protect citizens or to deny citizens the ability to protect themselves, let's look at what the poll is actually trying to do in a not so subtle way. This weekend, several deadly shootings occurred across the United States, including an attack at the Cedar Rapids nightclub that killed 2 people and injured 10 others. The poll results you see throughout this live chat do not reliably represent public opinion, although YouGov polls are used routinely to justify various points of view by many elected politicians and candidates and organizations. So to say that this isn't reliable does not stop this from entering the political sphere and the attempt of some groups to try and promote or deny certain ideas. The poll goes on to say, in addition to the events at Cedar Rapids, 4 people were shot in Washington, D.C. after a Major League Baseball game on Saturday. In Indianapolis, 6 people were injured after a shooting at a birthday party. How much have you read or heard about the shootings that took place this weekend? Before we get to any of the answers, this poll is absolutely corrupt. This poll is looking to manipulate the answers that it is receiving. This poll is deceptive and biased. And we can say that because of the nature of what we have read already. And I want you to recognize that because this will be used against your freedoms. This will be used to deny you the exercise of your rights and freedoms. So it's important to understand what is being said here. When I say that this is being used against you, let me be clear. The first thing that this poll says is that this weekend, several deadly shootings occurred in the United States. What weekend in the United States over the last 50 years has not had deadly events that have occurred? Name one. Because if we are looking at the reality, in a nation of 330 million people, every weekend there are deadly events. Every weekend. When the United States in 1968, with 200 million people, when I was born, had deadly events. In fact, 2 days before I was born, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. On the day that I was born, there were riots across the United States. Every day and every weekend is deadly. What is publicized is another question. What is amplified by the news media, something that they have focused on, that changes on any given day and any given weekend. But to say that there were deadly shootings that occurred in this weekend, it assumes that we think that the weekend before that, there was no such event. That at some point in the near term, in our recent past, this hasn't happened. That is a framing of the question and a framing of your mindset, which is an abuse. They are priming you to think in a certain manner, a manner that is betrayed by the truth. The facts, the empirical, actual data tells us this isn't true. I hope that explains why I'm saying this poll is biased. It has changed the nature of your thinking about the questions that it is going to ask because it has created a false narrative in your mind. We go on, it says, in addition to the events at Cedar Rapids, 4 people were shot in Washington, D.C. So they're telling us that people were attacked in a Cedar Rapids nightclub, but we're not understanding why. We're told that 4 people were shot in Washington, D.C. after a baseball game, but we're not told why. We're told that 6 people were shot and injured in Indianapolis after a birthday party. Were these individuals that were mentally deranged? Was this based on a religious belief? Was this because of drugs or gangs? What were the circumstances? Were these individuals defending themselves? Did anyone that happened to be injured or killed, were they the people who caused the problem? Were they the victims of the problem? Were they defending themselves with a firearm? What circumstances did this happen in? We're not told, but we are giving a scenario that is meant to have us evoke a certain type of emotion. We are being told to feel a certain way before we are asked the very first question of this poll. That is a manipulation. That is a setup. That is propaganda. We are asked to feel a certain emotion so that we can then respond in a certain manner. This is a propaganda push. It is meant to manipulate and to create an outcome that is desired by the individuals who put this poll together. And we would ask to YouGov and Daily Chat USA, who paid for this poll? Why is this poll running today? And you may ask yourself, why is this poll running today? This is because of a policy by the Biden-Harris administration. This is because of an agenda, a political agenda that is happening in the United States right now. Whether you agree with the goal or not is not the question here. The question is this honest? Is this fair? And are you being manipulated? So let us actually look at the incidents that they are talking about. How about Cedar Rapids, Iowa? From the Dispatch Argus, we see that the article earlier today, 2 people killed and 10 people wounded in a Cedar Rapids nightclub shooting. Who caused this to happen? We do not know. What was the reason why this happened? We do not know. What were the firearms that were used to cause this bloodshed, this violence? We do not know. All we know is that violence occurred, and the manner in which it was carried out, we can only speculate. Let me go on. Looking at the event in Washington, D.C., where there was a quadruple shooting. What firearms were used in these shootings? We don't know. Was this gang-related, drug-related? What do we know about this? We have no idea. Let me go on, because they mentioned another event. Looking at the birthday party. 6 people were shot, 1 dead after a fight at a birthday party. We don't know why they did it. We don't know how they did this. Was it one firearm, multiple firearms? Was this drug-related, gang-related? Was this an individual with a mental deficiency? Was it a religious outburst? Was it political? We don't know. So I want to be clear that we have just established that the news articles, the information that we know at the time that this poll was created, we have no data. We don't know anything. All we know is that individuals were injured and that a firearm or multiple firearms were used. That's it. We don't know the type of firearm. We don't know the reason for the shootings. We don't know the individuals that committed the shootings and whether or not individuals were trying to defend themselves with a firearm at the same time. This is critical information. This informs us of motive. But we also get to isolate here, why are they targeting just these areas? Was that the only place where violence happened across the United States? You know what they left out? They left out Chicago. It's very important. Chicago, a city that has had rampant and continuous violence for many, many decades. Even though it has every form of gun control that we have ever heard Democrats request over the last 4 decades of my lifetime alone. We see that just this weekend, 5 people were killed and 21 others were wounded, including an 11-year-old girl in weekend shootings in Chicago. If we are supposed to be feeling a sense of outrage, wouldn't they want to target a city that is known for that outrageous type of actions? What about in Baltimore? Again, this weekend in Baltimore police investigate weekend shootings that left 1 dead, 7 injured. So again, we see another city which is known for its continuous violence, often gang-related violence. Why didn't they mention Baltimore? Why didn't they mention Chicago? Let's be honest. The reason why is we know that every single form of gun control that has been suggested that exists in Chicago, in Baltimore, in LA, and many other cities across this nation, they don't work. They have never worked. They're not addressing the problem. They're addressing a political scenario, which are 2 very different things. And that political scenario involves taking away your freedoms and rights, even though 99.994% of all law-abiding gun owners in the United States, 165 million people, do not break the law and they have never broken the law, and they are never expected to break the law. I've gone into great detail to let you understand this YouGov poll has been set up in this specific manner. Why this is the first thing that they're mentioning before they ever ask a question, because they are manipulating you. They are specifically editing the information to elicit a very specific type of emotion from you so that they will get very specific results, or at least that's what they hope for. And they are making sure that they only give you information that will lead you to one outcome rather than giving you a more broad sense of the information so that you may get a more generalized or realistic response from you. I'm not asking you to agree with my views on gun control. I'm asking you to recognize how you are being manipulated. There is a difference. Let's go on. So what does the poll actually say? They asked us, how much have you heard about these shootings that took place? Now, the majority of people said a little. They've heard about this, just as I may have said, have you heard about the shootings this weekend in Chicago? And many people would say a little. Mostly, many people know that these events have happened across the United States for decades going on. These poll results show what chat users think in real time. They are not representative of public opinion, even though they are used in that manner, and YouGov knows that, and YouGov itself does publish its polls very often when it has results that it believes will be able to set up a certain type of ideology. We have gone over that before. Those in England have gone over it before. It is something that YouGov is known for doing, pushing ideology. Let's go on. And how worried, if at all, are you about the shootings in America? Now we understand why the mindset was set the way it was. If you were talking about Chicago, people aren't really surprised. People aren't really emotionally invested in hearing about more shootings in Chicago. We know that there are record deaths in Chicago. Chicago is one of the leading, most violent cities in the world. So that's why they wanted to get people's feelings. How worried are you? Because you probably weren't worried until they started mentioning places that weren't where you expected to hear them from. Places that are getting emphasis now, but weren't necessarily getting emphasis last weekend or the weekend before that, nor will they get attention next weekend. In fact, the news cycle probably won't carry past Monday. Now that they have put this mindset of fear into your head, that they have tried to evoke an emotion from you very specifically. How worried are you now that they have introduced fear to you? The majority of people said they're very worried, 42%. Somewhat worried, 23%. Not very worried, 17%. And not worried at all, 18%. But I wonder if we ask people and we're honest with them, and if this poll was honest with them, mentioning how many people per year are being affected by gun violence, by criminal actions, by gangs, either over drugs or over territory, of violence because of political or religious belief. If they were to give us a poll with that data, which does exist, the FBI publishes it every year. Many of these cities and states provide this information every year. We have been following this information from cities and states and the federal government for decades. Would you have the same emotional reaction? Would you have the same reaction seeing a 10-year trend or a 2-year trend or even last year's trend versus today? Would you get the same fear emotion that you get from the way they started this whole poll? It's a question only you can answer, but it's a question you should ask. Going on, they mention, in the next 10 years, do you think gun violence in America will, and here's the thing, they're asking you what's going to be future. Again, they've introduced fear to you. They have made you feel a sense of unease. Whether that's been justified or not doesn't matter. What has been the trend of gun violence in the United States over the last 10 years? Based on that, what do you think will happen in the next 10 years? Would you give the same answer as you give when they say, well, in these isolated cities, something has happened that we want to emphasize today, which may or may not be right in line with what we have seen historically and most recently? Would you give the same answer? Are you sure? So the answers that we receive are that in the next 10 years, gun violence will get better. Only 8% believe that. 30% believe it will stay exactly the same. And it will get worse, 54%. And 8% aren't sure. Now, what if I were to provide to you, as we have done in the past, the data that has come out from the FBI, from the CDC, from California, New York, and many other states across the United States, and all of the data correlates and tells us the same thing, that even as we get promises from our politicians to punish law-abiding gun owners in the United States, that has not had a demonstrable or statistical change in gun violence in the United States. Whether it's a red flag law or New York SAFE Act or restrictions on the Second Amendment or even Beto O'Rourke, the fake Hispanic in Texas, promising alongside Kamala Harris that they will remove the ability and rights of American citizens to own AR-15s and AK-47s, these, quote, so-called assault weapons, that all of that has had no impact. So to say that it would stay roughly the same, statistically, would actually be true. The poll never provides that to you. The poll never tries to provide you evidence that is substantiated by fact. Instead, they're playing off of emotion. So let's continue. And are we surprised that because of the emotion that they have tried to elicit and the lack of credible evidence that exists, that they refuse to provide people in this poll, are we surprised that 54% would say, well, it's going to get worse? Isn't that the message that we hear from the news media and certain elected politicians and candidates, that they want you to feel like this is getting to be a bigger and worse problem, which is not supported by the data? Let's go on. Joe Biden is expected to announce gun regulations on ghost guns. How familiar are you with the concept of ghost guns? So the truth of what this is seeking to target is the Biden administration's policy on restrictions on the Second Amendment. That they want to talk about an issue that isn't an issue, that doesn't exist. A problem that no one cares about and is not a focus of the United States government or any individual state, because it's too small of a problem. They are doing this poll to get temperature for the Democratic Party and to try and help promote Joe Biden's agenda of Second Amendment restrictions, to try and promote gun control, taking away your rights and freedoms. And they're using fear to do so. How familiar are you with the concept of ghost guns? Very familiar, 39%. Somewhat familiar, 39%. Not very familiar, 12%. Not familiar at all, 9%. Most people are familiar with the concept of what a ghost gun is. Now, I also want to stop for a moment and remind you of the context that this poll is being done in, because they're talking about the Cedar Rapids, Iowa shooting. We have no idea what gun was used. There is no evidence. They're talking about what happened in Washington, D.C. We have no idea the firearm that was used. They're talking about the situation that happened in Indianapolis. We have no idea about the firearms that were used. And in Chicago and in Baltimore, as usual, we have very little idea. So they have built up this concept in our minds that there is a problem with these guns, that doesn't exist in the data statistically, and they're trying to make us afraid. And in the way that they have framed the poll so far, they have established fear, and now they are giving you a reason for fear, and they are trying to promote a solution to that fear, theoretically, in the name of Joe Biden's gun control regulations. They have created a certain mindset, and that mindset does not rely on truth or reality. It only supports a political agenda. So let's go on. Ghost guns are weapons made from kits that are unregulated, untraceable. They can currently be blocked and built without a background check. The new regulation is expected to require background checks prior to purchase and to aid the government's ability to track the guns with serial numbers on the components. At what point does anything I've just said have to do with the shooting in Cedar Rapids, that has to do with the shooting in Washington, D.C. or Indianapolis? What does that have to do? Ghost guns are not the issue in any of those cases. In each and every one of those cases, there is nothing in any article or news reporting about this to indicate anything about ghost guns. It is not relevant. They are putting into your mindset that somehow there is a connection between these very specific shootings that they are mentioning with the idea of ghost guns that they are very specifically talking about, that reflects on the Biden regulation that they are referencing. There is no connection, but it is a way to manipulate your political thinking. So they go on to ask the question, based on what you know and how you are feeling, do you support or oppose this new regulation? What regulation? We don't know what regulation it is. We don't know what regulation that Biden has put in place. So how would we know how to feel about it? What does it actually do? What are we actually supposed to be opposing or agreeing with? They've given us a very hyper general view that does not explain details like what are the penalties for this? They basically just told us Joe Biden has a ghost gun protocol. So 59% of people say they support this generalized idea without any true facts behind it. And 37% oppose it. Fair enough. Should it be legal or illegal to purchase parts and assemble your own firearms? What does that have to do with what we have been told so far? Is that part of the Biden administration ghost gun protocol? Because we don't know, but we have enough to have an emotional feeling about this, that we can feel like something should or should not be allowed based on the setup that they have provided, a sense of fear, a sense of anarchy, and now we're being told that there is a solution to that fear, to that anarchy. 50% of those who took the poll said that it should be legal to purchase parts and to assemble your own firearms. 44% said it should be illegal. 6% said they're not sure. How much difference do you think the new regulation on ghost guns will or will not make in preventing shootings in America? Well, first of all, you haven't established that ghost guns are responsible for shootings in America. At no point in this poll have you established the danger of ghost guns. We know that Joe Biden wants to regulate ghost guns. We know that he wants to prohibit the ownership of these things. This is what is being put across to us. But at no point have they mentioned or given us evidence of information that tells us that ghost guns are a danger that need to be addressed. They want us to feel like that must be true. Otherwise, why would this question be within this poll that has this kind of setup, this kind of emotion behind it? But we don't know. They are manipulating you. The answer people gave is 1% says it would make a big difference. I don't know how they determined that. 19% said it would make some difference. 32% said not much difference. And 46% said that regulations on ghost guns would make no difference. No difference at all in America. Joe Biden is expected to nominate Steve Detterbach, a former U.S. attorney, to lead the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, otherwise known as the ATF. How much have you read or heard about him? He's a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Ohio. Most people, there 6% said a lot, 28% said very little, and 66% said nothing at all. Overwhelmingly, people just don't know who he is. And then again, if you're not from the Northern District of Ohio, there's no real reason why you should know anything about him at this point. What does this choice for the ATF, what does it have to do with ghost guns? What does it have to do with shootings in Cedar Rapids, in Iowa, in Indianapolis, in Washington, D.C., in Chicago or Baltimore? What does this attorney have anything to do with any of those situations that we have been told to feel about? What does he have to do with guns, in particular ghost guns? Why is he relevant to that? Why are we speaking about that? Other than to give Democrats a temperature check, what's called a temperature check in politics, to see how much of the public are aware and how much media is necessary for politicians in favor of or against this particular candidate to be able to get confirmed. This is a temperature check question. It has nothing to do with anything else on the poll. This is purely political, and this is purely for a political agenda. Generally, do you favor or oppose stricter gun laws? 48% favor it. 51% oppose stricter gun laws. Which one is more important to you? Controlling gun ownership or protecting the rights to own guns? These are two very different issues. They are conflating very different things. What's more important? The control of gun ownership. Whose control of gun ownership? It is implied to mean the government's control over gun ownership. But the government doesn't have that right. It presumes a right in a position of power that by definition in the Constitution, by birth, does not exist. And they are contrasting that with protecting the right to own guns. Again, as if this is something that is not inherently a right. The Constitution states it is an absolute right by birth. So protecting the right is to assume that that right was given and could be taken. You have to protect it because it was given to you and someone can take it away from you, except by definition, it cannot be taken away from you. So again, the poll is written to manipulate your emotions and the way in which you answer the poll, but more importantly, in the way in which you think about the issue of gun control. This isn't about what you think. This is about what you can be made to think. They finally answer, do you think stricter gun laws would or would not lead to less gun violence and shootings in the United States? The answer to that is it would lead to less violence. 40% believe that. It would not lead to less violence. 56% say that. We actually have an answer on this. Again, I refer back to the FBI every year that tells us an answer to this. We know that in New York State, the New York GIVE report and similar reports in California and many other states across the nation, we have the data on this. We do know definitively, without any question, empirically, we know the answer to this question. We have had increasing levels of stricter and stricter gun laws. In New York State, we have the New York State SAFE Act. We have in New York State and 18 other states the red flag laws, amongst other several, 22,000 additional gun laws across the United States. They have little to no impact. That is historically true. But it makes it harder for individuals to exercise their Second Amendment right. We know that too. That is also empirical. There is no question on that. And if this poll were actually looking to see evidence of what people think or how these things will apply, you would think they would mention to people that there is empirical data and to provide that empirical data so that people could then make a judgment that is informed, rather than an emotional response, which is misleading. And so they asked us, do we have any other thoughts on ghost guns, which this poll seems to be about, but that's not what it started on. That's not what it led us to believe. So again, this is about policy. This is about the Biden-Harris policy on the Second Amendment. This is about manipulating you on your Second Amendment rights. So we had this to say. Why did you bias this poll by starting with selected shootings? Why not include Americans using firearms to defend themselves, which is more frequent than shootings? Why not clarify the nature of the shootings? Gangs, drugs, religion, or just crime? We left out terrorism in there. Why focus on ghost guns, a category so minuscule that the FBI has never kept data on it, though it has become popular with politicians and media, just like the inaccurate term assault rifle created by a politician in California in 1984. Now, some will say to me, well, Mike, you just said in there that ghost guns are not important. That's right. And I will verify that. That's not just me thinking that. Let's look at 538, a left-leaning news media source. And in their article from November 2nd of 2021, the U.S. has a lot of guns involved in crimes, but very little data on where they come from. Other studies, which they won't cite and they won't tell you how many states this occurred in, have found that most guns used in crimes were purchased illegally. Was it more than 13 states? Were the numbers higher than 60%? They don't want to give you that information because it may change your opinion. This is a tactic, again, of manipulating the exact data that is available and only giving you parts of the information to make sure that you come to a conclusion that they would want. He goes on, there are about 400 million guns. Actually, the data by almost every estimate we have seen is about 350 million guns. And they go on to say that there's about 100 million gun owners in the United States. Actually, the consensus is that it's about 165 million gun owners in America, or roughly 1 out of every 2 people that you meet in America have a firearm. That is what the data has suggested. That is what we have seen consistently stated across various studies in America. But they want to be very specific in the way that they present this to you, that there are more guns and less gun owners. And even looking at Tom Chittum, the number 2 official at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, otherwise known as the ATF, Chittum was quick to say that the vast majority of those firearms are never going to be used in a crime. We want to look at ghost guns, and this is the same article. And looking at the article, it starts off talking in reference to ghost guns. And it gives us some idea about these ghost guns. In 2019, police in Philadelphia recovered 95 ghost guns. Last year was 250. This year, it looks to double that at 389. There are over 4,190 guns that are recovered in Philadelphia alone. Across the United States, it's estimated that somewhere between 3 to 8% are with ghost guns. Even if that were a growing problem, it is nowhere near the amount of a problem that comes from gangs, drugs, mental illness, individuals with fanatical religious beliefs, and political activists that are extremists. It is a way to engender an emotion to allow the government to gain greater control of your rights that are inherently with you at all times from birth, that the government does not have a right to interfere with unless we allow them to. YouGov is looking to manipulate you to make sure that ghost guns will be the excuse to take away more of your freedoms and rights. There are some who will hear this video that have made it to this point who will disagree with what we have concluded. They believe that ghost guns are an issue. We ask you, where is the evidence? There are some who will say that guns are dangerous, and they watch this video to try and see how we were wrong. We ask you, provide us the evidence on what we have gotten wrong. And more importantly, we ask everyone, whether you agree or disagree with our point of view about the Second Amendment, how is the YouGov poll and polls made in the same manner not manipulative and dishonest and used only to promote a political agenda? Regardless of whether you agree with the outcome, do you see and do you agree that this is a manipulation of your emotions for a political outcome, and that should not happen without challenge? That's what we believe. But we look forward to hear what you have to say. And we look forward to hearing from you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in our live stream where we discuss this and other issues from across the globe. We thank you and we hope you'll be well.